the psychological benefit of showing yourself that you are someone who can make a difficult decision and you are someone who can push through discomfort, that right there, that's worth more. You cannot buy that.
Yes.
There's no pill, you know, there's nothing out there like that. You have to show yourself you're that person.
So it really develops this mental strength, mental resilience. Because I have to say for myself as well is, you know, after all these years, just before going into an ice bath, it's just like, oh, it's going to be cold. Like, and just learning that is just a thought. This is where mindfulness I find really helpful. It's something that I teach through my center. It's like, it's just a sensation, becoming aware of it, breathing, relaxing into it. And just know it's just a thought, but it's not like the thought has disappeared for me after years. It's not like, oh, this is just going to be warm today. No, it's just going to be cold. And
Never.
Let's like every time I was like, okay, let's do this. Let's go breathe, relax. And I know it's just like a mental barrier that after so many times doing this, it's not an issue having that thought. Like it's going to be cold. Like, yeah, but that's good. I'm kind of learning to enjoy it actually and just to relax into it and actually enjoy the sensation, like be with the sensation.
Yeah. Well, and this is also where, you know, while we don't seem to form a tolerance to cold when it comes to the production of norepinephrine, this is though where to continue getting that psychological boost, I do think it's important to change it up a little bit. You know, taking a cold shower every day, that's a lot. That's going to be a lot for most people.
Yeah.
And that's going to do an enormous amount of good. And it's not like that will go away. It's not like you have to continue to expand you go colder or longer to maintain whatever level you've gotten. But the beauty is you can actually you can train this even more. And that's where the book comes into play, because I would highly encourage a person, if you're into cold showers. Now, I released the book August 31st because I want to make sure that people can ease into this, right? For most people, if you go into a cold shower, exactly. The wintertime, your cold shower will be much colder if you're like most people. So here I'm in Indiana right now, and the water out of the tap is like maybe 68, 70 degrees. I mean, it is not that cold, but for most people, it's
heading down.
Yes. But I mean, really, for most people, 68 degrees, 70 degrees, that is a cold shower. So I love being able to say, okay, start now when it's warm outside, because the temperatures will come down. And as they come down, you want to be training alongside that dip. And then the beautiful thing is, if you do that, and that's why in the book, I even have this digital stuff. So in the back of the book, there's this web address that you go to that, and I'm taking you through these exposures through this year. So I only have 2 up there right now, but as it gets colder, I'm going to do, you know, okay, now we'll do an ice bath, and then maybe we'll go out into nature and do an ice bath. There is something incredibly profound about you go out and you find this freezing over lake. It's insanely dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. And that's why I give you the directions, but it's such that is a milestone you will never forget. And that, again, is showing, not just telling yourself, look what I am capable of if I'm just willing to push a little bit beyond my comfort. I'm doing it in a smart way. I'm not being stupid about it. I'm not going out there without any safety, because that's dumb, right?
Yeah.
That's not going to help. If you go out there and it's insanely unsafe, it doesn't do anything good. It only gives you, if you have after drop or hypothermia or frostbite, those things prove to you something different. They'll prove to you that you can't do things. I mean, there's really that element that we have to really take into consideration.
Of course. And thank you for naming that for those who are not familiar with. What is after drop?
So there's different levels of hypothermia. And so all of us, we're walking around, and we once thought everyone had this exact same core body temperature. It seems like there is some fluctuation across the species, but whatever your core body temperature is, that is what you are naturally healthiest in. And when you go too cool, so whenever that core body temperature starts to cool down, there are certain enzymes, certain reactions that just cannot occur. There's 3D structures that fall apart, and you just can't sustain life.
Yeah.
And so when you practice in the cold, when you're cold training, the natural thing is that, and again, this is all the hypothalamus doing its work, but it's going to send the vast majority of your blood to the core so that it can stay protected. Because that's where you have the most thermal protection. Well, what happens is eventually, though, if you stay in the cold long enough, that core body temperature starts to dip, right? Now, if it dips and we're talking just as few as 3.5 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
That's hypothermia. And once you get to that point, you better call the ambulance. Do not try to figure it out yourself. You may be delirious at that point. You need to be careful. I mean, it's not a huge drop that can really cause a catastrophic, unstoppable drop that just keeps continuing to cascade. But for a lot of people, that's not the problem. For most cold trainers, they're smart enough to know, okay, they get out before then. But for, I would say, most cold trainers, I've had this. I mean, I've had all of these things happen, by the way. And this is one of those things where that's why I wrote the book. It's the book I wish someone would have written for me, but I didn't have that. So I had to find out the hard way. Okay, this is what hypothermia feels like. And I was very fortunate. I didn't have, terrible, I didn't die, but the next step after the thing that typically you will experience at one point or another as a cold trainer, if you push yourself hard enough, and this is just by accident, it's like going to the gym. If you go to the gym and you go to the gym long enough, you will have an injury. It's still worth going to the gym. Yeah. But it's like, okay, eventually you're going to sprain something or you're going to pull something. It's just part of being healthy. Yeah. Well, part of being a cold trainer, and hey, if you follow the directions in this book, you may never have it happen, but I've had it happen. What after drop is, it's when you get, a lot of times it's when you get out of the cold and you've been in it a little too long. And what happens is some of this cold blood, and you got to understand, your hypothalamus does a great job of keeping the cold blood at the surface because that's where it's safest. It's furthest away from the core. Well, eventually that blood does have to come back to the core because it all has to circulate through your heart. Right. So what happens is you've been in the cold too long and your body still has to process that cold blood. Now, this can happen in a few ways. One is that maybe you weren't actually in the cold too long. It's just that you allowed you got out and maybe you warmed up too fast. The blood vessels at the surface, they opened up a little faster than maybe what naturally would have occurred. And then that blood opens up, it comes back to the core, and now you feel uncontrollable shivers and you just feel bad. The lower this drop happens, the worse you feel, the less energy you have. But a lot of people just have a mild case where it's just they kind of feel shivery the rest of the day and they just don't feel good. So it can happen if you try to warm up too fast. It can also happen if you were just in too long, because at some point, you do have to process that blood. And so it's not a fatal thing. It is a thing where I have some protocols in the book as far as, okay, you want to take your temperature and keep taking it, every 15 minutes. If it drops below a certain level, I have the Celsius and Fahrenheit for everybody, depending on where you are. But, if it drops below a certain level, call the, ambulance. As long as it stays in here are the things you want to do to make your after drop experience as short and as bearable as possible. Yes. And, because there are things you can do to make it not as bad. And there are things you can do to get through it a little faster. And those are important things to know. And it's just part of the book that I felt, okay, most people are going to probably, accidentally push themselves. We all get in, you're like, oh man, I'm doing so well. And you get out maybe a little longer after whenever you should have gotten out. And so.
Hello there. And thank you so much for stopping by this channel. I hope you find this content useful. And if you do, feel free to hit that subscribe button. It will really help me to reach to more people and keep this content going. Here we are journeying together, and let's see where this takes us.